for a couple minutes to see if there are more people that are going to be interested. Get started. Hi everyone, I'm Pavish. It's nice to be here. So I've been working for the past 10 years with Postgres professionally. So I've worked across various roles, including marketing, support. I've worked directly with customers. Now I'm primarily a software developer, an engineer, but I've had to work across all these roles, and I've also had to work across large-scale organizations, small startups, and I've also had to co-found my own startup. So all of these blend of roles has incentivized me to target and get to know non-technical users a lot better. Now this is the reason behind my talk today. So my talk is going to focus on how we can make PostgreSQL accessible to these non-technical colleagues of yours and why it is critical to do so. Right? Now I think we can go ahead and get started. I was expecting more of a crowd, but right, so this is going to be the plan for the talk. So first we are going to see who these people are, why this is a problem, and why we should care about non-technical people, and how it affects us, all the technical employees in an organization, and what we can do, the steps we can take to help your non-technical colleagues. Right. So before going into the talk, I want to make an important distinction with respect to the terminology. When I say non-technical, I'm not talking about novice users. I'm talking about extremely smart domain users that don't understand technology. So they are smart people, but they're just non-IT people. Right? So this can include scientists, investment bankers, your healthcare professionals, the people who are pretty technical, but for the sake of this talk, I'm going to refer to them as non-technical people. Right, so let's start with an example. Let me give you an example on the kind of data management problems that these people face in their day-to-day work. So I'm going to go with some real life examples. These are posts on Reddit that I've collected to showcase that in a more prominent manner. So let's take a non-technical employee's perspective on their data management problems, right? So we in a technical bubble, we always tend to think in terms of our IT companies. But when you take software in general, it is used by a number of different industries, and there is a huge market out there, huge environment out there where software hasn't fully reached the people that require it. Now this is an example of someone who's posted they're working in a wood furniture company, and they're slowly leading into a management position, right? And this particular user is non-technical. They're in a management role, but they understand the business really well, and they've identified that there is a data problem. So they're noticing that there are massive mountains of data, and all of this is being calculated manually, and everything is in Excel, right? So right now everything is in Excel, and they are facing these issues where everyone has to go manually find these issues. They have to work together. They have to send Excel files to one another. There's a lot of conflicts that is happening. And this person doesn't know what to do, so he goes on to Reddit. He goes and asks all the technical people, for example, the people in this room. He goes and he says, listen, we don't know what to do, and we need this kind of a tool where we need a centralized system to store all of this, and we need to also mention the relationship between data. We need to essentially have linked data. So this seems very familiar. They're basically describing a database, but they don't know what a database is. And the community, so these are just the inferences I just told you, so the problems that they're facing. And the community just went with a common response, why don't you hire someone, right? So instead of telling them what to do, they just said, oh, hire a technical person, let them come and solve the problem for you. Now, let's take the other perspective, a very similar environment where it's a technical employee. Now, let's say that there's a problem, I'm the OPF, faced a problem, I've hired a technical person. So I've hired you to come and take a look. And you come into the organization, and then you notice that your team is using Excel everywhere, and your manager wants you to solve the problem. Right now, that's exactly what's happening in this other Reddit thread where they're saying, see, there's one Excel book with so many worksheets. That's the central hub. All our critical data is managed here, and they suddenly want me to solve all the problems that their organization is facing. Now, this is a technical user, and they're mentioning that their colleagues don't have rich technical knowledge, but they want a solution that's easy to use, that's acceptable to all of them, and it's also in a highly regulated Fortune 50 company. So what do I do, right? So this is the technical user, they come to Reddit, I'm asking all of you, what do I do? And the common response is quit your job. Right? So as hilarious as this is the case in many organizations. This is very common. So nobody actually ends up solving the problem in this scenario. Now, why is this critical? Why the reason why this is, first of all, what these exchanges tell us is don't ask for help on Reddit. And most importantly, it says that spreadsheets are often the go-to tool for all these non-technical employees. Now, because they are highly accessible and these people don't know the other technologies that are there to solve their particular problems, most essentially a database management system, they've never heard of one. So they use the technology that's readily available to them, which is often spreadsheets. And you have to think further, right? So we are a technical community, you have to think further. So the databases have existed for more than 6 decades. But why are spreadsheets so popular? Why are these people always preferring spreadsheets? Why haven't databases been more accessible to these people? Now you have to look at this, right? Non-technical people are often the real owners of data. When you take an organization, how much data does a technical person create there? If you ask that question, like take a small business, let's say a boutique, right? This is a real example. One of my friends runs a boutique. They create data every day. They enter their customer information, they enter the measurements, they enter what they require, and there is linked data. They understand for the definition how each of these, like a customer has multiple orders, they know how it is linked. So they understand the data really well. They create data on a regular basis, but they don't understand what technology to use. There's very limited knowledge of DBMS among these people. Now when you take an organization, a non-IT focused organization, like a general organization, the ratio of the employees to non-IT employees is around 1:27. So for every one IT employee, there is 27 non-IT employee who doesn't know any of the technologies that they should be knowing to help with their data management skills. Now spreadsheets are more popular and that's helping them solve those problems. At the same time, spreadsheet companies, they try to, now these users have growing use cases that spreadsheet companies are trying to falsely mimic, because these are use cases coming from their users and they're trying to fix it, right? So this leads to spreadsheets being misused as databases. Now don't get me wrong, I love spreadsheets, but they often get misused and this leads to a bunch of problems. Now I'm going to share some real popular news stories that happened. So just imagine the first sentence, right? So scientists end up renaming human genes because Excel kept misreading them as dates. Now these are scientists, like these are people who sequence your genome, they try to come up with medicine, they are doing a lot of research on basically human genetics, and they have been using spreadsheets for pretty much everything, like for clinical trials, for scientific research and all of that. And what happened is every time they entered their genome, Excel kept converting them into dates because it resembled dates, right? So imagine the irony in this situation. These highly technical, highly talented people, the nomenclature group, the human genome nomenclature group saw this. They were so defeated by Excel that they decided, instead of trying to solve that problem, let's just rename the genome entirely. So that's what happened. So all of them renamed the genomes, and this is a scenario where data integrity and consistency was super important, but that went missing. Another real life example where more than 16,000 COVID-19 test results got missed because of a size limit exceeding size limit. And these are all scenarios where asset compliance is very mandatory in these scenarios, which is missing because these people don't know the right technology to use. There are more examples if you want to look at the examples. So there's an entire group dedicated to this, the European Spreadsheet Risk Assessment Group. So they notice all these incidents, they put it down to say, hey, listen, these are all real life scenarios. Like it doesn't matter, the technology databases have existed for a long time. If your bank, if your financier doesn't know how to use it, or if your scientist doesn't know how to use it, if your healthcare professional doesn't know how to use it, in the end it's going to come and bite us, right? So we need to, as a technical community, it's important for us to make sure that these people have the right access to the technology that they need to use. Now, so this is some of the points of how it affects a technical employee. So if you're working in an organization and if you have colleagues who are non-technical and you are hired to solve their data management problems, but in reality what you're expected to do is actually solve the problem with the organization process itself. Like in the second example, they hired a technical person to streamline their data workflow, but what they wanted to do is they didn't want to have these conflicts. Like that was their requirement. Like, hey, we keep sending Excel files to one another, it's causing a lot of issues, I don't want these conflicts, so I'm hiring you, fix this for me. And that is not a problem that we can solve, that is an organization level problem, and that can only be solved if those people knew how to use the technology themselves. It doesn't matter how many technical people they hire, that problem is never going to get solved, and that's something that it is left to us to figure out. And all the acceptable solutions keep revolving around technologies that are already aware of, mainly spreadsheets, and that always ends up being a problem for us. And most technical people, including DBAs and engineers, we end up being intermediary to data. So every time they want to request data, they come and ask us. And every time they want to update something in production, you are supposed to help them do it. And even though they are the ones that are responsible for all those tasks, you are expected to be the intermediary, and nothing can work without you. And this happens so much that you are not allowed, you are not able to focus on your work. Like if, for example, I used to work in an e-commerce organization, large scale one, a pretty good company. So I was supposed to be building the APIs and managing the web platform, but I kept getting requests to update the data, get me reports. This happened on a very regular basis, but none of this work was actually treated as work, because these are things that take dedicated time, but people just assume that's part of what you have to do. Now imagine if those employees were able to use the database directly, right? So imagine if they did it, basically the people who model the business itself will be able to model their data, and they will be able to use the database directly. They will totally be able to avoid disturbing you, and you will be able to finally focus on doing what you need to be doing, which is focusing on building technical infrastructure. Now this is hardly a reality. It's going to be a long time before we could even get to a situation where people can directly use databases. And that's sad, because imagine as a community, like Postgres in reality has existed for more than 3 decades, so 35 plus years. And it's not penetrated these people yet. So it might be the best loved tool among all the technical people here. But if they don't know how to use it, what purpose that it solves to the general community as a whole, we need to make sure that, now this is not specific to Postgres, this is to databases as entirety. Like there are tools that are solving their problem, and the people who need it the most don't even know that these tools exist. Right? Now, for the ecosystem, the point that I made, the Postgres has existed like for more than 35 years, and it is favored and loved among technical people, but the non-technical people don't even know that such a technology exists. Now, there's a huge unrealized potential in getting Postgres out to these people. So in today's morning, we had a talk on the future of Postgres, where a number of points were mentioned, but if you notice, most of the points were targeted for technical users. It all mentioned that Postgres can do this, Postgres can do that, we'll grow into helping the technical community achieve more things. But there's a lot of unrealized potential among non-technical users. We don't have to do extra work on the ecosystem. We just have to make it more accessible to all these users. And there aren't enough general purpose tools that make it easier for people to start using Postgres. So before we go on to how we can get to that result, I want to share a little bit of history. So at the beginning, there was Ingress. Right? So Ingress was a research project at UC Berkeley. It was the first one that started, and Ingress, not the first database, but it was a very popular database during that time. And Ingress used something called Quell as its query language. So basically, Quell stood for query language. So we are all highly technical people. Most of us are used to code, and we are all taught that whatever name we come up with, it has to be highly descriptive. So query language, just mash it together, it's Quell. Postgres conference, mash it together, PGConf. So that's how we name things. And so there was a commercial version of Ingress that gained a lot of popularity during the 80s. So what happened was Oracle suddenly started losing market share. So they started fearing Quell and Ingress as a whole, because it was slowly becoming a threat. People are giving it focus. Now Oracle 4 during that time, that's when they introduced SQL. So basically it was a pun to say it's a sequel to Quell. Get it? So it's a sequel. That's a terrible pun, but so SQL then started gaining a lot of recognition, and ANSI made it pretty much the standard, and all the databases followed suit. And more or less Oracle later on gained market share, and Ingress was out of the race. Now after Ingress was out of the race, things didn't end there. So that's how PostgreSQL was born. So when Ingress was out of the race, Stonebreaker returned back to Berkeley, and he created a post-Ingress database. So basically, again, mash it together and you get Postgres. So that's how our beloved database was born. And of course, Postgres introduced a lot of improvements, and one of the most notable ones was how extensible it is. Like a lot of people today talked about extensibility, and that is the core part of how what Postgres meant. And it used a query language called PostgreSQL at that time. But later on, this PostgreSQL was entirely replaced by SQL because SQL was so popular and ubiquitous at that time. It was mandatory that every database had to use SQL. Now, see, that's still a debate going on. There was a debate going on quite recently, like should we rename PostgreSQL to back to Postgres? Now, this was a huge debate if you had followed or if you want to follow. It's a lot of fun conversations. But you understand the impact of SQL or SQL so much that most databases have it in their name. Like take it Microsoft SQL Server or MySQL. Like they explicitly had to mention that they support SQL because that's how important SQL was. Now, you have to ask the question, how did it become so important? Like there was a lot of debate during that time, and many felt that SQL was superior. A lot of people felt that SQL followed Edgar Cott's relational model very well. It is superior, but still SQL won. And the question, the reason was very simple. Like SQL was just more accessible. It was more English. Novice users could come in, read it, study it, get started with databases. Whereas SQL required a lot more technical depth and knowledge. And so basically SQL was so much more accessible than SQL that it won. It became a primary part of relational databases, and it still exists to this day where you cannot imagine a traditional database without SQL. So this is now that was the first accessibility concern that Postgres had to handle. Now this is the next wave of accessibility concern that we need to handle, which is making our databases more available to people of all skill levels, not just the technical ones, mainly the non-technical ones, the people who need the data the most. And Postgres ecosystem right now is the best suited to take leaps and bounds in this direction. And here are some of the things that we can do right now. Like the major problem with database adaptation is that a lot of people don't know databases exist. Now the first thing that we have to do is make sure that we improve database literacy. Now this can happen in many ways. It can happen in your organization. Go to your non-technical teams. You can talk with your, for example, help desk teams. You can talk with your marketing team. You can teach them, you can tell them, here, there's a technology called database. And there needs to be more community-driven general purpose interfaces to Postgres, and that the number of GUIs that are available are all targeted towards technical users, and we need more that are targeted towards non-technical people. And of course, training and documentation are very essential. And we need to also provide them with an easier option to migrate from their spreadsheet-based workflows to database-based workflows. And I've been dunking on Excel so badly, I gave examples about Excel, about the troubles that Excel has caused. So I have to be careful around the Microsoft booth, I guess. But I have to mention that MS Access deserves a shout out because it might not be a very popular database, but it is one of the very few databases that find this problem and target it. Now, MS Access by itself might not be an amazing thing, but it is part of a pipeline. So people are so used to Excel, they can get started easily with MS Access, and MS Access can connect directly to Microsoft SQL Server and enabling them to migrate their entire database to the SQL Server. So it kind of forms this bridge between spreadsheets and databases, and they did a good job at it. Of course, it has a bunch of problems which we will not be going into today, but we need more general purpose, community driven, open source software in that manner that helps us, right? And so before we go on to explain the steps that we've been taking at Mathesar to achieve this, these are some things that you can do today to help your non-technical colleagues. Now the first thing, as I said, is to raise awareness. Now this might seem like a very direct approach, like this is general knowledge, like of course we need to raise awareness, but the amount of times that it happens is very less. Like we don't often try to teach our non-technical colleagues technical stuff. We don't care enough. Maybe I wouldn't say care enough. We think that those people are not ready to learn technology. But in reality, like I mentioned earlier, these are not people that don't understand data. These are very highly skilled people that understand data, that know how to work with data. They are probably the people that can model the data the best because they understand the relationship between their own data. However, they do not understand how to properly use a database management system to manage their data. And so that should be the first step at solving this problem, is mainly to raise awareness among these people. And we need to advocate more for database literacy within our organization, because it isn't enough that we want to do this. It is important that the organizational policy allows it to do it, and that's very hard. Like convincing anyone or your managers to try and make this an organization-wide policy is very hard, and you have to talk to them in their language. You have to tell them, show them the risk of dangers of using spreadsheets, like how much it could affect your business in the end, and talk to them in the cost benefit ratio, and tell them that here, these are the risks that can be alleviated by moving to databases, like using the non-technical people working with databases. And this isn't such a wide or a strange concept. Like all of us technical people are expected to learn the domain when we build software, right? So we cannot be building any software without learning the domain. And it's also, in that sense, it's also important that we make sure that people who are expecting you to build the software also understand databases and the technology behind it and the limitations of the system, so that you can work well together. So if they are enthusiastic, if they are really enthusiastic, you don't have to worry much. My recommendation would be to just install PostgreSQL to them. And of course, there are installers available for all the operating systems. For Windows and for Mac, it's available. EDB installer is pretty good. If they're using Linux, you probably don't have to worry about them. They'll figure it out. And give them easy instructions, and most importantly, get them to learn SQL. So remember when I said SQL was accessible? Now if you had taken a look at any of their Excel formulas, you'll realize that SQL is way better than the formulas that they daily work on. So these people understand their data, as I mentioned earlier, and SQL would really help them get to that, help them use databases more freely. Now this is, again, like it's a very hard thing to do, but this is for the enthusiastic. If they're showing interest, if they are being enthusiastic about things, about databases in general, this is something you can do. This is something you can help them with. But here's the problem, right? So what do I do about the people that are not enthusiastic? Now these are the people that you cannot convince. These are people you're going to have a hard time convincing. And there's only one thing that I want you to take out of this talk, is to make sure they get familiar with the terms. That's all you have to do. So when people work with data, when people work with data in general, they understand all the relationships among their data. So in the example of my colleague or my friend running their own boutique, they understood how to store customer data. They understood the customer data had to be normalized. They cannot store it in a huge list because the same customer kept repeating. They understood they had to store measurements separately. They understood they had to store orders separately. They knew how to store everything separately. They knew how each data related to the other. They knew everything there is about the data, but they didn't know what the terminology was. So when they were talking to me, they were just saying random things. Say, I want to connect this thing with that thing, and they didn't know how to explain what they wanted. They weren't able to explain their vision very clearly to me. And it's very simple. All we had to do is tell them, see, you have one huge table and you're separating it to tinier tables, and we call that data normalization. That's it. So this is just the terminology that we are introducing. And introducing simply the terminology will get them a long way, because that is often the hardest part of getting them to learn databases. So once they are equipped to, once they can talk to you in the same terms, they can get started with databases much easier. And of course, you can use a bunch of tools to help them. For managers, if you want to use reporting tools, or if you want to use dashboarding tools, these are some of the tools that you can use. And there are a lot of tools that are available in the link if you download the slides later on, that you can install, get them to work with. And these are all tools that showcase the database directly, that use the same terminology, so that people keep seeing these terminology over and over again. They get more indoctrinated, they get familiar with these terms, and it's easier for you then to convince them to start directly working with the database. So here comes the fun part, Mathesar. So this is the open source product that we've been working on for the last couple years, 2+ years. And we are completely open source, we are community led, and we are part of a non-profit organization. So our goal was to make sure that PostgreSQL was accessible by all these users. So all the problems that I've been mentioning so far, our goal is to make sure that we solve all these problems. At the same time, we need to make sure that the power of databases isn't lost. Like there are plenty of low code, no code solutions out there that try to solve similar problems, but they don't give direct access to the database to non-technical people. So we wanted to make sure that we provide that access, we don't lose the power of databases, and at the same time we are as user friendly as possible. And you can see our mascot is young friendly tusker, an elephant, which is symbolic of what we are trying to do. And I'm going to show you some of the things that you can do with Mathesar today. So this is basically data entry. So you can see that the UI offers a very familiar interface to the users, a spreadsheet-like interface where people can just connect to your database, connect to your tables, and the table will be displayed, and they can start editing it right away. Right? So it provides a familiar interface so that you don't have to sit and train them how to use the tool. They can start working with the knowledge that they already have. And data entry is an important part of the operations that non-technical people do, so we put a lot of attention into making data entry as simplified and user-friendly to these users. And here's filtering, sorting, grouping your data, basically analyzing your data. So we offer a wide variety of operations here, like if whatever filter they want to perform on their underlying table, we can filter it via the UI. And we also offer filtering not just the direct values that are present here, for you filtering across tables. Like if you had foreign keys, you can filter it, you can open the foreign keys directly, you can filter it by columns that are present in another table. So we offer all that functionality right now. And setting up data models, we really thought a lot about this. So many tools that are present out there, they focus mainly on DML. And we wanted to make sure that, as I said earlier, we give full power of databases to these users. And one of the things that we wanted to ensure that they are capable of doing is being able to create their own data models. Like the basic way a person would create a data model. So for example, if you're running a library, you intend to put all the data in a single table. So you intend to put your books, you put your publishers, you put a lot of data into a single table. And then as your knowledge of the data grows, you want to then split the table into two. You want to normalize stuff. You want to do a bunch of things that you're already capable of doing. And doing the same on a database is very hard if you don't know what you're doing. And Mathesar makes it really easy. So they can just get started by creating the tables themselves. And once they create the tables themselves, they can easily perform a wide variety of DDL operations. And I can show you one of them. So setting up relationships between tables, we make it really easy for them to create relationships among tables in their database. So we also ensure that we add help sections wherever possible to make sure that they know what they're doing, and we use the right terms. We say that links are stored as foreign key constraints. We can learn more about it, and this is how it works. So these are the kind of links and how the column is added. All of that is visually expressed in such a manner that it is easier for whoever takes a look at this to know what is happening under the hood. So this is one other important feature that we allow users to do. So we allow users to perform schema migrations quite easily. So when I talked about normalizing tables, so if they create a huge table and they want to remove some of the rows, for example, you have the orders table where you have the name of your customer and the order that they've placed, and you have a bunch of rows there, and the customer details are being duplicated because it's the same customer giving you multiple orders. Now you might think, hey, let me just move this to a separate place. Mathesar offers a simple option. You can just select the column, create a new table with that column, or if there's already a linked table, you can move that column to another table. So we do all of this under the hood, and we give a very simplified UI to the user to start doing this. So under the hood, we have a lot of utility functions. Primarily, all these functions are placed in under namespace under a schema that we install onto the database. This is to enable technical users to also make use of it. Like if you are technical, you are more adapted or used to the command line interface where you can directly use those functions, and non-technical people can use the UI. So this is one other thing that we've built. So this is the data explorer. We're still trying to improve a lot of things here, where people can join tables. So once you have a normalized set of tables and you want to see all of them in a single view, it's very hard. But this UI allows people to choose a particular column and then choose columns from other related tables, join them all together, view them in a single user interface. So essentially, it allows you to create a view, but then these are not views that you are storing immediately. These are views that they're running. Like queries that they are running on the fly. So these are joins that the users can run directly via the UI. And having said all of this, these are all parts that we've paid a lot of emphasis on. One of the main things is interoperability. Now, if you are working with Postgres, whatever stack you have, whatever extension you use, Mathesar will work directly on top of it. Right? So that's a good chance that it might directly work on top of, let's say, Yugabyte. We don't know, we have not tested it, but we could. But the idea is to make sure that we don't diverge, we don't do anything fake on the UI, that it goes away from the database. For example, we have like columns like URL and email columns which we create on the UI, and these columns translate into custom data types that are created on the database itself, so that if there's another tool using the database, that tool knows that it's a custom data type. So instead of creating a fake text type and doing all the validation on the UI, we perform all of that directly on the database. So that's one of the reasons why we are focused directly on Postgres instead of becoming a general purpose tool that connects to multiple databases, is because this being connected directly to Postgres enables us to do things like these, where we can use the database's potential entirely, and we can integrate deeper into the ecosystem of that particular database, and in this case it's Postgres, the one that we all love. And so this works directly on top of your existing infrastructure if you have Postgres, and it has high degree of interoperability with other tools that you already use, and it doesn't reinvent terminologies. So it's an important point when I talked earlier, where teach non-technical people or let non-technical people get familiar with database terms. Now, Mathesar does not reinvent any terminology, so whoever uses Mathesar gets to learn the database terminologies as they are. So if it's a foreign key, it's called a foreign key. If it's a constraint, if it's a unique constraint, it's called a unique constraint. So you know what it is, you know what it does, and the non-technical people using it will be able to use that directly. So this is our journey so far. Like I said, we've been working for more than 2+ years. We've been in active development. We have more than 2,100 plus GitHub stars. We have 90+ contributors in just 2 years. We are still in alpha, by the way. We have not released our beta version yet. Now, when we launched our MVP back in March 2023, we made the top page on Hacker News for almost an entire day, for 24 hours, and we got about 75K plus page views that day, and which led to a lot of people reaching out to us, talking to us about Mathesar. That also led to increased contribution count. And we are in our alpha stage. As I said, we have more than 6 releases. We have 6 releases. The recent one was a couple days back, and we are continuing to make releases, and we are trying to talk to users as much as possible, trying to understand the difficulties that you have faced, trying to understand what kind of problems that you have in your organization, talking with other non-technical users, so that we will be able to prioritize the features that we build. We'll be able to make them better the way they are. And we've already been talking to a number of users of all sorts of background, and we are hoping today I get to talk to a lot of you if you have any problems in your organization, or if you have a use case that you can use, that you can work with. And we are inching step by step closer to beta, and as we are inching towards it, we are trying to do more. We are trying to bring in the power of Postgres' entire permission system on the UI. Right now we have not fully utilized the permissions capability that Postgres provides out of the box. We want to bring it all into the UI. The general idea is that even though we are initially focused a lot on non-technical people, we are not going to completely ignore technical people. We want to make everything easier for all of them to use. So we want to make sure that all the features that are on Postgres are translated into a user-friendly interface that people can directly work with. And that's our goal, and we are inching closer towards the beta. I hope you could check out Mathesar when you have the time, and this is how you can help. Check it out, try and install it, to use it on top of your DB. Now, even though I said we are alpha, we can still work on top of your DB without destroying it. So, but don't use it on a production DB, use it on a general DB. You can talk to us, like I mentioned. I'll be here, I have my colleague Anish here, or you can reach out to us directly. You can see our website, we have all the information there on how to reach out to us. Talk to us about your problems, and if you'd like a new feature, you can always let us know, because we are trying to, one of the reasons why we are still in alpha is because we want to know that we are of help to people, right? So before we go to beta and say, hey, we are stable, start using it, we want to make sure that we are building the right features. We want to make sure that we are solving real problems for users. We are making it easier for everyone, and that's why the more comments that you have, the more feedback you have, the more it will help the entire team. And you can become an early adopter. You can start working with Mathesar right away, or even if you want to contribute to the repo, check it out. If you want to contribute, you can do this. And the previous talk before me was about the APIs, an API layer providing an API layer directly. Mathesar can do that. We have plans for that, but it's not anytime soon. But eventually we are planning to make it easier for the developers as well by once you connect Mathesar to the database, you get your APIs ready-made. That's it. You don't have to do anything extra. Connect it to the DB and you get a set of APIs that you can directly use. So that's my talk for today. I can take your questions, but I can also show you a quick demo of how the website. So you can, if you want to check out Mathesar, you can go to demo.mathesar.org. You can log in to your laptop or wherever you, if you want to check out Mathesar, and you can start working with Mathesar. If you want to try it real quick, and can show you some of the things. Right? You can see that, so everything that I said, you can directly use it. So I can take any questions that you might have right now, and I can also show more features if you're interested.
I don't.
Okay.
I don't think so. This is just for non-technical folks because we have data scientists and developers who don't directly work with databases.
Yeah.
And I think machine learning engineers and data scientists who are just interested in going and building their models, but they want to do quick, dirty experiments. This might be useful for them because they don't have to really deal with the complexity of the databases. The other point is, have you tried to approach these kind of users, or you've just tested it out with the non-technical folks?
I think you came in between the talks. So when I said, during the entire talk, the term non-technical was mainly used to describe these kind of users. Highly technical people, but non-IT people, like scientists, investment bankers, healthcare professionals. These are people that are experts in their domain. They just don't know how to work easily with technology. So that's what I was. So it was part of the definition. But I agree. They have been our primary focus, not the novice users. These kind of users have been our primary focus, and all the conversations that we've been having were primarily with these users.
My point is more on that this is still usable for the folks who understand the database.
Yes.
But they don't want to go on to the server side of things and do things. So for example, data scientists, machine learning engineers and developers who want to do quick, dirty experimentation, this is pretty helpful for them.
I agree. I completely agree. Thanks for bringing that up. Yeah. So yeah, the goal was to satisfy users of all skill levels, and today's talk was about non-technical users in general. Sure. Can you give me?
Hello. Yeah, but first of all, this is really a good one, a very different one of the ones which expected from PGConf. Good one to shout out to you and your team.
Thank you.
Yeah. Coming back to the point, as she said, when you gave this all slideshows, like many use cases are coming in our mindset. So I being a DBA, we maintain Oracle and all other stuffs. First thing strikes me is the development team.
Yeah.
So every time they come, as you said, like for every checks and every DMLs they want us to intervene and do, but they are the ones who know the data model.
Exactly.
So like, what things you have? Do you have any special setups for like people who are having the knowledge of database, and we want to limit that for certain things, like? And do you plan anything like CI/CD pipeline and all like?
Yeah. So when you say limit, do you mean with respect to what you want them to do on the database?
Yeah.
So basically restricting
data modeling,
the permissions.
like
Yeah.
stages of restriction.
Okay, so you want to allow, for example, you want to allow DML but not DDL, things like that.
Kind of.
Yeah, so that's what we are working on right now. So I'm personally working on it. So we are trying to integrate it closely with permissions in Postgres. So that's what I meant by when I said that. And the idea is to, right now it's still possible in our alpha version. It's just that it's a lot harder to do the same thing, but you can try it out. We can help with installing a similar environment right now. But the idea is that Postgres permission system, the Postgres access level system provides you pretty much everything that you need. Like you create a Postgres user, you can limit them into doing any small operation that you want on the DB. And if you can do that, if you just create that user, provide that user to Mathesar and say, hey, the development team that logs into Mathesar should use this user on the DB, you will be able to limit their access. So you will be able to let them do anything that particular Postgres role can do on the DB. So your use case can be completely satisfied.
Even like creating of a separate schema,
yes,
everything.
Agreed. That creating schema requires a user level attribute like create attributes. So you can, as long as you can configure it on the DB and use the user, you can do it via Mathesar.
I'm just asking, as I have not explored this, is it already available here?
It is available. It is available.
Okay,
yes.
okay. And are you planning to have only Postgres as the backend, or you are having ideas of using other?
Now, right now we are completely focused on Postgres for the reason I mentioned earlier. So the more focused we are on Postgres, the more power we can bring to the users. Like we can tie closely to the database. We can do a number of things that, if we are general purpose, we are also limited by the combined limitations of all these databases, right? So if I'm creating something very simple like a email data type, I have to create it in all these different DBs, and if they have different limitations, and my software will now have to deal with all the limitations together, and you can only provide a subpar feature. But if you are tied closely to one particular database, in this case Postgres, you can bring the entire power of that particular database on the UI.
Okay, so maybe the last question. So if I want to make use of this, maybe consider like for my team.
Yes.
So should I already have a database, Postgres database installed and ready, on top of which I will be implementing this, or this comes as a package, like by default some set of databases
you can do both. You can do both. So if you create a this is on the demo mode, but I can show it to you later. So you can create your own database. So it comes with an inbuilt DB, so you can create your own database if you need, or you can connect directly to an existing database. And we are prioritizing connecting to existing databases because that's the most common requirement. But the idea is that you would be able to do both.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah, so I also had a question about restrictions, but more from the point of view of restricting users to run expensive queries, especially if the data is more. So is there any capacity like that?
Right now we have not thought about it, but you could mention that. I mean, we are open source. I can show you our repo. So we take feature requests. You could mention that, and it will help us prioritize the feature that. So you can go to Mathesar Foundation /Mathesar, and you could raise a GitHub ticket, you can raise a discussion, and we'll be able to assist you in any of the requirements that you might have. Right? So we already have a bunch of requirements. We put that on the website, and this is a new requirement that we have not heard so far. So we'll have to think about it. We'll have to prioritize it based on other feedback that we get, and it's definitely something we'll consider. Thank you.
Thanks. Nice talk.
Hi, once again, excellent presentation, and I really love this tool. I'm a technical product manager, and so I kind of handle a lot of database products, but my user base, as you rightly said, were actually non-techies.
Yeah.
Business owners, product managers, product owners who have no clue about the SQL language, but they still want to use the data.
Yeah.
So might be I thought like this could be a good.
Yeah, I hope we could solve your problem.
Yeah. So the question that I have is, they already have a bunch of reporting tools.
Okay.
Right? They do a lot of data mining to kind of solve some of their use cases, or even for that matter get data. So what I was not able to understand is, how is this going to be different from some of the reporting tools that are already there? That's one thing. And the second thing is, maybe it's a good idea if you can probably show some demos of some of the use cases that you plan to.
Okay.
That will help me to kind of relate it back to their requirements.
Okay, sure. So one of the main things that we differ from all the other tools is we are more general purpose. We are not aiming to focus on, right now at least, we are not aiming to focus on just one thing. Like for example, we are purely going to do analytics. We are purely going to do DML operations. We are purely going to query the DB, show a graph. No, we want to be more general purpose. We want to give them the access over the entire DB. So whatever you can do with PSQL on a command line, we want to make sure that we can do it via the UI. So that is one thing where we differ from all of them. And like the second thing that I said before is that all the other tools, they have limitations and they fake a lot of features, because if they try to target multiple databases, there is no other option. You'll have to do some abstraction on the user interface in order to do that, in order to provide those features. But Mathesar works directly on the DB. So if you have other tools like reporting tools already existing on the DB, Mathesar can just connect to the database and you can start working with it. Like for example, if you have a Superbase, or completely different, if you have a Superbase setup and you want to use Mathesar along with it, you can connect Mathesar along with it. So whatever, if you have a Postgres DB, Mathesar will work with it. Mathesar doesn't create its own abstraction. So that's one other part where we differ. And like you said, the demos, I think I can show it to you directly after the talk based on what you want to see. I think we can talk together and I can showcase some of the things that we can do. Right, so thank you everyone. I don't think there are any more questions, and if you do, please talk to us directly. It's nice to be here and it's nice to meet all of you. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you so much.